Burkina Faso had known many crossroads in its long and turbulent history, but none felt as profound as the dawn that settled over Ouagadougou on that unforgettable morning. The air crackled with a strange union of anxiety and anticipation, an energy that whispered that the world was about to tilt, ever so slightly, in favor of those who had long suffered under its weight. For decades, foreign influence had pressed on its spine. The shadows of old power structures stretched over its borders. Yet this time felt different. The drums of a new era echoed across the Sahel, rolled across the plains of the Sahara, and found their thunder in the halls of power where a new alliance was quietly being forged. Far to the north, the cold corridors of Moscow vibrated with whispered conversations of strategy, ambition, and opportunity. For the first time in generations, a global power was preparing to enter Africa not as a master, but as a partner, or so it claimed. And within these ambitions lay the cornerstone of a $6 billion agreement that would soon dominate global discourse, a sweeping military, an education pact designed to transform the geopolitical DNA of West Africa. The West had not seen it coming. In the weeks preceding the announcement, a quiet dance unfolded behind closed doors. At the center of it was the determination of a young military leadership in Burkina Faso, a generation that had refused to bow to the pressures of old alliances and outdated expectations. They wanted sovereignty, not the ceremonial kind paraded at international conferences, but the real, felt, lived sovereignty that allowed a nation to stand upright without being nudged, bribed, or coerced. They wanted the right to decide their own destiny. The deal with Russia's Ministry of Defense was not born from desperation, as Western analysts would later claim. It was born from a deep, simmering resolve. The Sahel had become a battleground for influence. Extremism, poverty, and instability were convenient tools wielded by global players to justify military presence. Burkina Faso understood this all too well. They knew that security handed over was sovereignty surrendered. If the country was to rise, it needed a partner willing to treat it as a stakeholder, not a subordinate. The negotiations unfolded with precision. On one side sat Burkina Faso's delegation, stern, guarded, and unapologetically clear about what they wanted. On the other sat Russian strategists, calculating, pragmatic, and eager to cement a footprint in a region where Western influence had begun to fracture. But it wasn't weapons alone that sealed the alliance. It was education. Russia proposed scholarships for 10,000 Burkinabe students to study engineering, medicine, cybersecurity, linguistics, aviation, geology, and nuclear science. Entire campuses would be built in Burkina Faso, powered by joint research programs, laboratories, cultural exchange institutes, and military academies. Professors would be flown in to train local educators. Curriculum reform would be undertaken with Burkina Faso in the driver's seat. For the Burkinabe leadership, this element was irresistible. Weapons could win battles, but knowledge won nations. The military aspect of the deal was equally vast. Over the next decade, Burkina Faso would receive advanced air defense systems, armored vehicles, satellite surveillance support, communication encryption hubs, and a new class of Sahel-specialized counterinsurgency units trained by joint forces. The pact also included the construction of a strategic military base, jointly operated but fully under Burkinabe command, a symbol of sovereignty strengthened, not outsourced. As word filtered to Western capitals, panic set in. Intelligence reports were scrambled together. Emergency meetings were held. Spokespersons issued veiled warnings about maintaining regional stability, a phrase that African leaders had learned to interpret as pressure wrapped in diplomacy. Across the corridors of Brussels, Paris, and Washington, the mood turned from confusion to disbelief, then to quiet rage. For decades, they had assumed their influence was unshakable. But Africa was rewriting its story. Inside Burkina Faso, the effect was immediate and electric. Youth groups organized rallies celebrating the dawn of a new era. Universities buzzed with conversation about the opportunities ahead. Farmers in remote villages heard whispers of agricultural technology programs coming from Russia. Families who had long dreamed of sending their children abroad wondered if destiny had finally opened its doors. Critics voiced concerns about sovereignty, about foreign influence, about historical patterns. But this time, the leadership's response was clear and unwavering. Partnerships must be evaluated not by the nationality of the partner, but by the weight of the respect they offered. Slowly, a narrative began to take shape across the entire African continent. If Burkina Faso could break free of its old chains, perhaps others could too. Across the Sahel, in neighboring Mali and Niger, murmurs rose of forming a new bloc, one built not on imposed alliances, but on shared purpose. They watched Burkina Faso's bold move with admiration and curiosity. African unity was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a strategic necessity. If global powers wanted influence, they would have to negotiate with a united Africa, not a divided one. Meanwhile, in Russia, the deal was hailed as a masterstroke of diplomacy. Beyond geopolitics, its significance ran deeper. It symbolized Russia's return as a force in Africa, a force capable of offering alternatives. The old colonial networks shivered as the foundation beneath them cracked. As the signing ceremony approached, global media descended on Burkina Faso. Their coverage was tense, dramatic, and often laced with apprehension. Analysts warned of new Cold War fronts and dangerous precedents. Others insisted Burkina Faso was naive, reckless, or manipulated. Yet as the delegation arrived at the presidential hall, the people filling the streets outside felt none of that fear. They felt possibility. The signing took place under the warmth of Sahelian sunlight. The air was thick with the sound of drums, chants, and waving flags. Military officers stood in crisp formation. Traditional leaders wore embroidered garments representing centuries of culture, power, and continuity. Youth leaders, activists, farmers, students, and elders gathered together, united in witnessing history. As the final signatures were placed on the $6 billion pact, a collective exhale rippled through the crowd. It felt like reclaiming something that had long been denied, the dignity of choice. The reaction from Western capitals was swift. Sanctions were discussed. Aid cuts were threatened. Media outlets launched narratives questioning the leadership's judgment. Diplomats were dispatched to seek clarification. But such tactics no longer frightened the Burkinabe people. After all, pressure only exposed who truly respected sovereignty and who only respected influence. What the West misunderstood was the emotional, historical, and spiritual weight of the moment. Burkina Faso was not merely choosing Russia. It was choosing itself. And as global powers scrambled to adjust their strategies, the impact of the deal spread across Africa like wildfire. From Accra to Johannesburg, debates erupted. Could Africa finally rise through diversified alliances? Could the continent escape dependency cycles crafted over centuries? Could education, not charity, be the cornerstone of a new dawn? The Africa of tomorrow was being imagined in real time. Months passed, and the effects of the deal began materializing. Russian engineers and Burkinabe architects broke ground on the first joint university campus. Military officers trained in desert warfare returned with advanced strategies. Satellite surveillance stations reduced insurgent mobility. But the biggest change was intangible, the psychological shift. A generation of young Burkinabe grew up believing their nation could negotiate on equal footing with the world's powers. That belief became a weapon more powerful than any missile, more transformative than any treaty. The West continued to express concern, but beneath the diplomatic language lay a deeper realization. The monopoly on African influence had been broken. Geopolitical tectonics had shifted, and Burkina Faso stood at the epicenter of the transformation. Years later, historians would look back and call the $6 billion pact a turning point, not because of its financial scale, but because of its symbolic force. It was proof that when a nation chooses courage over fear, sovereignty over dependency, and knowledge over manipulation, it becomes unstoppable. The world had been stunned. Africa had been awakened. Burkina Faso had been reborn. And in the quiet corners of classrooms, in the shadows of military outposts, in the dreams of students preparing to study thousands of miles away, something powerful was taking shape. A future Africa, standing tall, united, educated, armed with dignity, and ready to claim its rightful place on the global stage.